At 2:17 a.m. at Engels 2 Air Base, a seismic event unfolded, marking a pivotal shift in the military dynamics between Ukraine and Russia. The strategic bomber Tu-160, once paraded by Russia as a symbol of power during its flights to Venezuela to project global intimidation, has now been transformed by Ukraine from an emblem of dominance into a strategic liability. US intelligence had long exposed vulnerabilities in this platform, and on this night, Ukraine delivered the decisive blow. Comment number 2 if you support Ukraine, number 3 if you support Russia, and number 4 if you stand for peace. In just 90 seconds, the engines of the Tu-160 erupted in a catastrophic high-temperature fire. Simultaneously, a nearby storage facility holding 60 KX-101 cruise missiles detonated in a cascading chain reaction, obliterating Russia's planned winter offensive campaign. This was no accident, but the outcome of a meticulously orchestrated strike by low-cost drones, cheaper than the wristwatches worn by Russian generals. These drones penetrated Russia's multi-billion-dollar S-400 air defense network, which was preoccupied chasing high-altitude decoy targets. This operation targeted far more than tanks or fuel depots. It constituted the heist of the century, a campaign designed to strike at the very core of Russia's nuclear triad.
The Tu-160, known in Russian service as the White Swan, stands for Moscow as an inviolable relic of Soviet-era glory. To the rest of the world, it is merely an aging asset worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Recall when Russia deployed these bombers to Venezuela to menace the United States. Washington barely flinched, quietly monitoring through sensors while dismissing the noisy, easily detectable birds. For Ukraine, however, this was deadly serious. Preparations had been underway for 48 hours. Kyiv did not rely on luck. It proactively ambushed a Russian transport convoy, moving a brand-new Tu-160M. The initial strike did not destroy the aircraft outright, but severely damaged its wings, compelling Russia to leave the 20-ton-plus beast exposed on the northern apron of the base. Logistical chaos within Russian forces left specialized hangars unprepared, turning the Kremlin's most expensive asset, valued at $270 million, into prime bait undergoing emergency repairs under the open night sky. At 2 a.m., just 600 meters inside Russian territory, along the Volga River, the atmosphere hung heavy like the last breath of a fading empire. 6 miniature quadcopter reconnaissance drones silently traversed the thick fog over the river, scanning for the sleek yet menacing silhouette of the Tu-160M. Moscow had banked on its impenetrable S-400 air defense umbrella to shield the White Swan. They assumed no one would dare touch this icon. They were wrong. The stakes here were incalculable. Success for Ukraine would not only eliminate one bomber, but cripple Russia's entire winter strategy. Every Ha-101 missile in the fortified bunkers nearby translated to another freezing night for Ukrainian families.
By targeting this base, Kiev was playing a high-risk strategic game, preemptively robbing Russia of its power projection capability before the first engine could spool up. Tension gripped Ukraine's command center. Scouts had acquired the target. The drone swarm was inbound. Over a 1,000-kilometer distance, in the realm of strategic logistics, that is a formidable journey. Yet for Ukraine's 50 Beaver drones, it was a one-way mission to reduce the Kremlin's priciest toy to highly flammable scrap. At that moment, the drones raced across central Russia at ultra-low altitude, just 260 feet. This was not mere flight, it was terrain-hugging infiltration. They skimmed along the Volga River, exploiting the banks and dense morning fog as natural camouflage against the S-400's long-range radars. The drones remained virtually invisible, masked by Earth's curvature and tree lines. But Ukraine was not relying solely on low-level tactics. They were executing a daring electronic chess match. Suddenly, 10 dedicated decoy drones broke formation and climbed high, screaming into Russian sensors, "Look here, we're Storm Shadow cruise missiles." The Russians took the bait.
Inside the S-400 command vehicle, radar screens erupted in red alerts and chaos. In panic to safeguard the Tu-160M, the commander fired 48 N-6 interceptors, each costing $8 million, into the stratosphere to engage decoys worth only $50,000 apiece. That return on investment would make any Wall Street trader chuckle.
As the decoys vanished in fireballs 5 miles up, Russian crews likely cheered, believing they had thwarted a NATO-level assault. They had no idea they were swatting ghosts. While the S-400 radar stared skyward, the Panzer S-1 systems, touted as drone killers capable of tracking 300 targets, faced a digital nightmare. River-reflected jamming, combined with dying decoy electronic noise, created a sensor kill box. In precisely 45 seconds, the Panzer fire control computers were virtually paralyzed. Russian operators panicked, turrets spinning wildly as they struggled to distinguish real threats from environmental clutter. The subtlety lay here. The decoys were programmed to simulate a high-altitude assault. Panzer crews, trained to protect the White Swan, elevated their twin 30mm cannons skyward to counter the phantom overhead attack, leaving low-level approach corridors completely exposed. Inside Ukraine's mission control, silence was deafening. But here came the twist. Concealed in tall grass, just 365 meters from the Tu-160M's massive landing gear, 4 shadows held their breath. This was an elite GUR Ukrainian Defense Intelligence sabotage team. While the world assumed Ukraine sent only robots, these ground operatives formed the human element in aviation history's boldest heist. They were not there to destroy, but to hijack the aircraft home. They carried electronic bypass codes and portable starters to ignite the NK-32 engines. In those breathless minutes, the heist of the century was within reach. They spotted the opening. Sentries gazed upward. Panzer turrets spun erratically toward decoys, and the White Swan was momentarily abandoned.
This represented the pinnacle of automated grand theft, with a nuclear-capable bomber worth billions as the prize. Yet Kremlin security layers extended beyond digital. The moment the team leader touched the boarding ladder, a high-frequency red alarm, distinct from air raid sirens, shattered the quiet. Russia's rapid response force activated like an internal antivirus waking up. From afar, headlights of 3 Tiger armored vehicles raced toward the apron. Plan A, the theft, slammed shut instantly. The operators vanished into the Volga fog like ghosts. On a rugged tablet, the team leader swiped the final encrypted command. Plan B engaged. Telemetry data showed the remaining 40 Beaver drones circling silently over the river, receiving the kill order. Now fully autonomous and AI-guided via image matching, the Tu-160M glowed brightly in infrared like a neon sign in a dark alley. Sentries stared at rooftops, ground security chased shadows in the grass, while the real thieves, 40 explosive-laden drones, were under 60 seconds from the front gate. Russia's pride was moments from a catastrophic structural divorce, and the gatekeepers never saw the punch coming.
At 2:40 a.m., the Ukrainian AI aboard the lead Beaver drone felt no emotion, but if it could, it would mock Russian military doctrine. The Kremlin's antivirus layers, Panzer crews, and rapid responders swarmed the Tu-160M, treating it as the sole piece on the board. They fixated so intently on the Swan that they forgot the nest. Just 400 meters east lay the true backbone of Russia's winter terror campaign, the K-101 missile depot. There, 60 deadly cruise missiles stood fueled and ready to freeze Ukraine. Abruptly, the 40 Beaver drones executed a synchronized bank. They abandoned the aircraft and dove toward the storage bunkers, skimming the ground so low they nearly scraped the runway paint. Inside the Panzer S-1 command vehicle, pandemonium reigned. Imagine solving a Rubik's Cube while riding a mechanical bull. Russian crews did not just fire, they held triggers in blind frenzy. Twin 30mm cannons unleashed 5,000 rounds per minute, tracer streams painting a neon green symphony across the sky, like an 80s disco floor in hell, reeking of Russian desperation and gunpowder. 18 Ukrainian Beaver drones vanished in brilliant orange fireballs. One hit mid-flight, spun like a frisbee, before skidding 900 feet across the tarmac. Russian teams probably celebrated, convinced victory was theirs. But the cruel subtlety. These drones did not just fly, they learned.
With each loss, the remaining 32 adjusted flight paths in real time, using AI to recalculate wind shifts and pansear reload cycles. It was like damming a flood with chicken wire. This was swarm logic at its most ruthless. Microsecond final data from each downed beaver, tracer impact trajectory, wind variance, pansear firing rhythm was instantly shared across the swarm. While Russians sprayed and prayed, surviving drones executed micro-evasive maneuvers and altitude shifts, resembling the deadliest game of dodgeball ever played. Suddenly, they split, feinting away from the White Swan and confusing the pansear crews into firing at empty sky. Instead, they veered sharply east toward the K-101 depot. 22 drones impacted the reinforced doors almost simultaneously. Impact. Inside the missile storage, thousands of gallons of JP-10 jet fuel ignited, generating a thermal event peaking at over 5,200 degrees Fahrenheit. The 60 K-101 missiles, Russia's entire monthly winter attack budget, initiated a chain of detonations. Guidance systems melted into pools of expensive silicon slag. Titanium frames twisted into grotesque shapes. Yet Ukraine held 10 Beaver drones in reserve. The final 10 executed a high-G turnaround, composite wings groaning under stress. Ignoring fuselage and cockpit, they zeroed in on the 4 NK-3202 engine intakes, the planet's most powerful combat engines. To Ukrainian AI, those massive air scoops were not aircraft components, but a $10 million invitation to a funeral. Suddenly, Russian ground security realized the White Swan was the target.
The scene was indescribable desperation. A lone Russian sentry on a nearby fuel truck opened up with a PKM machine gun, tracers spraying wildly into the darkness like trying to stop a swarm of bees with a garden hose. One Beaver took hits, its fuel tank exploded, and it plummeted like a burning meteor, skidding to a halt inches from the Tu-160's landing gear. The sentry cheered for half a second before the remaining 9 delivered the final precision strikes. The lead drone slammed into engine number 3. The thermobaric warhead did not merely explode, it triggered the Monroe effect, focusing the blast into a thin jet of molten copper, moving at 23,000 feet per second. Picture a pressure washer filled with liquid lava blasting straight into the heart of a Rolex. That jet pierced the still-spinning titanium compressor blades from the prior engine test run. The result was a catastrophic blade throw failure. Precision-machined blades did not simply break, they fragmented into shrapnel, shredding the engine casing from within, like a grinder packed with steel bearings. Then came the second and third hits. The White Swan did not erupt into a Hollywood fireball, its fuel load was relatively low, but it suffered a devastating structural divorce. The enormous engine bays, enabling Mach 2 dashes, turned to molten metal scrap. Internal hydraulic lines, the aircraft's nervous system, were severed by molten jets, leaking red fluid across white wings. By the time the final Panzer locked and vaporized the last drone, the damage was total. Russia's pride, the bomber once flown to Venezuela to prove superpower status, now stood as a $270 million monument to technical impotence. It listed heavily to one side, intakes torn open and spine shattered. When the first Su-35 fighters finally roared overhead, afterburners lighting the graveyard below, they hunted only ghosts. Ukraine's thieves had sent their message. Russia lost not just a bomber, but the myth of its invulnerability. The Kremlin's most expensive bird was now silent, high-tech junk. And the gatekeepers arrived only in time to watch the house burn down. Stay tuned, as the strategic domino effects of this 60-second masterpiece are set to redraw the entire winter map. First, the raw math. Ukraine just delivered a textbook lesson in return on investment, ROI. With a handful of composite-bodied drones, essentially high-tech lawnmowers, Kiev handed Moscow a repair bill that would floor any Fortune 500 CEO. The White Swan was not merely damaged, it was effectively decapitated. Replacing NK-32 engines is nothing like swapping a Tesla battery. These are handcrafted masterpieces, and production is strangled by sanctions. We are looking at a $150 million revival project, stretching at least 8 months.
For the rest of winter, this multi-million-dollar bomber is reduced to an exorbitantly expensive white paperweight.
But the K-101 depot strike was the true mic drop. Neutralizing 60 missiles in a 60-second window erased roughly 150 planned sorties. That means hundreds of Ukrainian homes spared bombardment and dozens of power grids kept online. Russia's winter terror campaign did not just stumble, it lost its front teeth. And this domino effect has the Kremlin in panic mode. Engels 2, once the safe room for Russian long-range aviation, has become a kill box. Within 24 hours of the strike, satellite imagery revealed surviving Tu-160 and Tu-95 bombers hastily dispersed to Olenyadyse in the Arctic Circle. Consider that logistical nightmare. Relocating the entire strategic fleet an additional 2,000 miles is like moving your office to a new time zone while still commuting daily. It means longer flight hours, accelerated wear on aging airframes, and significantly reduced on-station time. For every White Swan Russia tries to armor, a Ukrainian F-16 or Storm Shadow missile gains another open-door invitation at the front. The legend of the impenetrable air defense umbrella was not just punctured, it was shredded. Ukraine did not need to capture the White Swan alive to win. They only needed to prove that in the 21st century, a swan is merely a large, slow target for a grudge-holding beaver.
So what do you think? Was this the smartest tactical turning point of the war to date? Or has Russia just endured the world's most expensive bad day? If you were a Russian commander, would you pull defenses from the front line to safeguard your pride? Or let the swans get picked off? Drop your thoughts below and tell me which technology impressed you most. Comment number 2 if you support Ukraine, number 3 if you support Russia, and number 4 if you love peace. Don't forget to like if you enjoy seeing the underdog rewrite the rules, and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive analysis tomorrow.